Kore Mwapinduka and welcome to Africa Good Morning, your portal into Africa's potent stories. Today we begin in Madagascar after a dramatic cabinet dissolution by military leader Colonel Michael Randrianirina before moving to Guinea's political crackdown and Congo's Republic's high-stakes election. We then turn to Ghana's call for condemnation following an attack on its peacekeepers in Lebanon, and to Morocco's rise as Africa's largest arms importer. Later, we cross to Botswana with Rorisang Mogojwe, and in AGM Economic News, we unpack Kenya's growing state house budget and Egypt's latest fuel price increase. Now, don't forget, in Today Later on NTV, we are going live at 8 a.m. Join us for the Namibian Budget Dialogue Breakfast, an exclusive discussion on the 2026-2027 national budget under the theme of Powering Our Future, featuring a keynote address by Honorable Erica Shafuda, Minister of Finance, and a special guest address by Vusi Tembekwayo, a global entrepreneur and leadership strategist. We will be right back on the other side of this with your top stories. Do not go away.
In a world where politicians promise the moon and deliver potholes, where democracy sometimes arrives in camouflage and ballots often look like formalities, one show dares to laugh with Africa, at Africa, and sometimes for Africa. This is Second Take, your weekly dose of political satire with an African soul and a global edge. From coups disguised as press briefings to ministers moonwalking past accountability, we serve the real news with sharper writing. Each week we bring you the TikTok of the week, because sometimes the revolution is vertical, and the heartwarming moment of the week to remind us that not everything is burning. We also sit down with the bold, the brilliant, and the brave, voices that question power, stir thought, and spark laughter. Because when the headlines are wild, the leaders are louder, and the truth is lost in translation, we all need a second take.
In our top stories, we start off in Madagascar. Madagascar's military ruler Colonel Michael Randrianirina has unexpectedly dissolved the government, dismissing the prime minister and the entire cabinet in a move announced through a statement by his spokesperson. The statement said the government had ceased its functions and confirmed that Randrianirina would appoint a new prime minister in line with the provisions stipulated by the constitution. No reason was provided for the decision. Randrianirina seized power last October from Andry Rajoelina after weeks of youth-led protests across the Indian Ocean island. Rajoelina had been elected president for a third term in a disputed poll in 2023. Demonstrations were driven by persistent power and water shortages, eventually leading the army to side with the protesters. Randrianirina pledged to organize new elections within 2 years. In December, the Southern African Development Community directed Madagascar's military authorities to submit a roadmap for restoring democracy, including plans for fresh elections by the end of February. On Monday, Randrianirina dismissed the entire government and assigned permanent secretaries to oversee ministries' daily operations until a new cabinet is formed. Activist groups calling themselves Gen C and Gen Y movements had issued a 72-hour ultimatum for his resignation. In our next story, Guinea's main opposition leader said direct resistance to the country coup leader turned President Mamadi Doumbouya was now the only path to political change after the government dissolved 40 political parties. Doumbouya, a former Special Forces commander, seized power in 2021 and won a 7-year presidential term in December in a result contested by his opponents. Legislative elections are expected in May in the West African nation rich in bauxite and iron ore. Guinea's Ministry of Territorial Administration and Decentralization announced in a decree that the headquarters and local offices of 40 political parties would be closed and that use of their logos, acronyms and other distinctive signs would be prohibited. Authorities said the parties had failed to meet legal obligations such as filing financial statements, though several of the dissolved parties insisted they had complied with the requirements. In a video statement posted on social media, opposition leader Cello Dialien Diallo declared that war has been openly declared against Doumbouya's challenges and urged Ghanaians to engage in direct resistance without specifying how it would occur. Diallo is currently in exile outside Guinea along with former President Alpha Condé. Moving on to our next story, Congo's Republic President Denis Sassou Nguesso appears set to extend his decades-long rule in elections scheduled for Sunday, even as speculation grows about who might eventually succeed him. The 82-year-old former paratrooper first seized power in 1979 coup in the oil-rich Central African nation. After losing Congo's Republic's first multi-party elections in 1992, he returned to power in 1997 following a civil war. Sassou has now ruled for almost 42 years in total, making him Africa's third longest-serving leader after Teodoro Obiang of Equatorial Guinea and Paul Biya of Cameroon. He will face 6 candidates in an election organized by a commission dominated by figures appointed by the ruling Congolese Labour Party. 2 major opposition parties are boycotting the vote, arguing the process lacks transparency, while several potential challengers are imprisoned or in exile. A constitutional reform adopted in 2015 reset presidential term limits and allowed Sassou to remain in office, but also restricted presidents to 3 5-year mandates, meaning this could be his final election unless another reform occurs. Sassou has recently spoken about succession and mentioned younger generations taking over leadership. Ghana has urged the Commonwealth to condemn a missile strike on its United Nations peacekeepers in southern Lebanon that injured 4 Ghanaian soldiers. Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa raised the issue during a Commonwealth meeting in London on Sunday, describing the bombing as an attack on the principles the UN Charter exists to defend. The minister did not say who was responsible for the strike. Israel has been targeting Hezbollah positions in Lebanon after the Iranian-backed Shia group launched rockets and drones at the Israeli city of Haifa to avenge the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Ghana's army said all 4 injured soldiers are now in a stable condition. 3 sustained minor injuries, while 1 who was critically wounded successfully underwent surgery and is responding to treatment. The soldiers were serving with the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon when their base was struck shortly before 6 p.m. local time on Friday. Videos circulating on social media showed extensive damage and fire in facilities housing Ghana's battalion. Ghana's foreign ministry has also formally lodged a protest with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. We're swing over to Morocco. Morocco has become Africa's largest arms importer, overtaking Algeria and Egypt as regional defense spending shifts amid changing geopolitical competition. Data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute shows Morocco increased its arms imports by 12% between the 2016 to 2020 and 2021 to 2025 periods, and now ranks 28th globally, accounting for about 1% of global arms imports. The United States supplied 60% of Morocco's imported weapons during the 2021-2025 period, followed by Israel with 24% and France with 10%. Several defense agreements remain pending with partners, including Spain and the United States, suggesting Morocco's military modernization program may expand further. Algeria's imports declined sharply by 78% over the same period, placing it 33rd globally with 0.9% of global imports. Russia remained Algeria's main supplier with 39%, followed by China with 27% and Germany with 18%. Despite North Africa's spending, overall arms imports across Africa declined by 41%. Sub-Saharan Africa moved in the opposition direction, with the imports rising by 13%. Nigeria accounted for 16% of regional purchases, while China was the largest supplier with 22%. That concludes our top stories. We will be taking a look at the Botswana report, but first, the weather update. Here to bring us the latest news from Botswana is Rorisang. Good morning, Rory. How are you doing today?
Dumelang, good morning to you. Thank you so much for having me today right here on Africa. Good morning.
All right, that's good to hear. Now, starting us off in your first story, government moves to calm fuel supply fears.
Thank you, Ashwin. Well, the public assurance comes after President Duma Boko warned that currently Botswana holds only about 9 days of full security. He was speaking at a leadership forum of his party, the Botswana National Front, which is a contracting member party of the Umbrella for Democratic Change coalition. Now, while he was giving his remarks to members of the party, he noted, or rather warned, that currently Botswana has only about 9 days of full security. And of course, this caused a little bit of panic, a little bit of alarm amongst members of the public, because the general interpretation of it was that currently Botswana is experiencing a fuel crisis. However, the government has come out to allay those fears and to assure the public that the country is not facing a fuel crisis, despite concerns over the country's limited strategic reserves. Now, the government, through the Ministry of Minerals and Energy, noted that fuel supply currently remains stable and that March stocks are fully secured, while April and May have already been arranged. Minister Boholoki Nwendo also said that currently combined reserves of government and the private sector could sustain the country for about 14 to 19 days in the event of any disruptions. And she also pointed to plans to build new fuel depots by 2027 in order to boost national reserves. Now, the regulator, the Botswana Energy Regulatory Authority, also came out to make these assurances, saying that currently Botswana has about 22 days of full supply for March, which is based on commercial stocks of roughly 68 million liters. And while the supply outlook remains stable, according to the government, the regulator has however, warned that the escalating conflict in the Middle East, as well as the disruptions to key shipping routes, could actually pose a risk, or could actually pose risks to future fuel imports. However, as the regulator and as the government, they continue to hold or to keep a close eye on the global events that are currently happening that could potentially affect fuel supply in Botswana.
Fuel security. Le tshwanetse le nne le fuel ye ka re tsang dikgwedi tse tharo go sena sepe se se tsena mme ha re leng teng re tsamaya ha kae betso 9 days. Fuel security, reasonable minimum 90 days. Botswana, Republic of Botswana, at the moment, fuel security can only take us 9 days. How ka ska gata lo kwane le pehe 9 days go ra dikolo di eme so te le tsa lona to ke le bolela di emotse ke te re ska ra nna le ke tsa etsego rothe ha gore re hakae. This is where we are.
In your next story, a same-sex couple challenges marriage law in the High Court.
Yes, so the couple, two women, Bonolo Selelo and Solofelo Kumile, argue that Botswana's Marriage Act unlawfully excludes same-sex couples, and it also violates their constitutional rights and protections of equality and dignity. They also argue that the law denies them key rights, which includes inheritance, economic security, and the ability to make medical decisions for each other. Now, this couple has been together since 2023, and they have previously tried to register their union or their marriage with the Department of Civil and National Registration in 2025, but their application was rejected on the basis that the law currently does not recognize same-sex unions or same-sex marriage. Now, this case has drawn a lot of opposition from the church as well as some traditional groups, being the Dingwezi Association. Now, the Dingwezi Association is basically a group of married women who believe that two women getting married should not be allowed to happen, as it is against culture, the culture of Botswana. Now, these groups have applied to join the proceedings as in a bid to stage demonstrations against this case. They were actually at the court, the High Court, last week when this application was being made. They attended the court session and they did express their disapproval, their opposition of this case. However, the case has also attracted support from LGBTQI, groups, including Lekhabibo, which has backed this challenge. Lekhabibo is the same rights group that rallied government for the recognition of consensual same-sex relations, which they won in the year 2019. It was a landmark case in Botswana for queer rights, basically. And so Lekhabibo calls this a fight for equal legal protection. We understand that the High Court will hear this case in July. It will hear this matter in July, and of course we will keep you updated as and when developments happen. But let's hear from what the couple had to say. They do actually liken their fight for love to the founding president of Botswana, Sesera Tsakama, who fought for his interracial marriage to be recognized, as he was married to a British woman. But let's hear what the couple had to say regarding their same-sex union challenge to the High Court.
I fully intend to get married, and I say this because Ghana, Botswana, we have a tendency to fight for love, isn't it? And that's why in our papers we even give an example, for even though racism he fought for that love. So we're doing the exact same thing, because it's in our blood as Botswana to fight for love. And I actually thought about that. I thought it was very funny, and yet we are here, a fully functioning member of society, having our full faculties, saying let us get married about the Lenyalo le ile ko tlase batho lona ga re batle lenyalane. Does it make sense? You get? And I was actually saying to someone, it's very odd that, you know, for people, especially because we're seeing a lot of activity by Christians. But it's very odd that the Christians are the Goliath in this situation. Or now we're two people just saying, let us live our lives.
All right, Rorisang, in your last story, the government is pushing to revive school sports.
School sports in Botswana was suspended in 2020 following disputes over teachers' allowances and funding shortages. And since then, Botswana has struggled to perform consistently in many sporting codes. As we see, athletics is the only sporting code currently receiving international success. And this was primarily through an out-of-school club system. And so many people believe that the return of school sports would see many young sporting champions be developed at grassroots level and eventually go on to experience or to see international success in the sporting world. Now, the Minister of Sports and Arts, Jacob Gilibeng, attempted to relaunch this program in August of last year. However, the initiative stalled once again because of teachers. Teachers' unions are saying that they had not been consulted in this relaunch of the program, simply because they are the ones who will be responsible for coaching many of these young sporting stars. And so they needed to know how the government would be compensating them for this time, for their time to coach sports outside of the teaching curriculum. Now, despite the setback by the teachers' unions, Gilibeng also said that government remains committed to restoring school sports, and he noted that it really simply plays a very crucial role in developing young talent. And so consultations are currently ongoing with key stakeholders, including the teachers' unions and including the Ministry of Education. And unions are now engaging their members on the way forward. And in the meantime, the government plans to establish a temporary structure which will bring associations, sporting associations, in order to coordinate the return of school sports, the return of the program, with a long-term plan to create a single body to oversee the program nationally. And this is according to the Minister of Sport and Art, who is very hopeful, and he remains optimistic that school sport will return to Botswana.
Thank you so much, Rory, for bringing us the latest news from Botswana.
Thank you, Ashwin. That is all from me with the Botswana Report. Let's meet right back here next week, same time, same place. Africa, good morning.
All right, don't forget that we are going live today at 8 a.m. Join us for the Namibian Budget Dialogue Breakfast, an exclusive discussion on the 2026-2027 national budget under the theme of Powering Our Future, featuring a keynote address by Honorable Erika Shafuda, Minister of Finance, and a special guest address by Vusi Tembekwayo, Global Entrepreneur and Leadership Strategist. Catch it all on our NTV platforms, that is DSTV Channel 285, GOTV Channel 25, and on our website, 1up2.com. From me, Glenara Shipura, until next time.